So welcome. This is the A to Zero Sustainability Series. And please help me give a warm welcome with the Office of Sustainability and Innovation, Jordan Larson.
Thanks, everybody. Could we get the slides pulled up? Perfect. There we go. All right. How's everybody doing? Thanks for coming out tonight. My name is Jordan Larson. I'm a community engagement innovator with the Office of Sustainability and Innovations. And thank you so much for coming out to what is our fifth and final session of the 2025 Sustainability Series of forums here at the Ann Arbor District Library. This time has flown by. It's kind of crazy. We're at the end here. But we are very excited tonight to bring you Ann Arbor's sustainable energy utility and you. Now, this series is one that brings local experts and change makers together to share the amazing and inspiring work that they're doing in the community. Now, often we bring in additional partners outside of OSI staff, but tonight's topic, we've got a lot to go through that's specific to internal work around the SEU. So we're really excited to have Missy join us tonight, which we'll bring up in just a moment. But now before we jump in, we can just do a quick kind of review of where we are here in the series. We've done these once a month, the last Thursday of the month, January, all the way up through this month, May. We've explored topics around natural features in Ann Arbor, innovations with sustainability in Ann Arbor's food and beverage sector. We've explored waste reduction and circular economy practices. And then just last month, we looked at ways that we're supporting change making through community grants. And so we've covered a lot of ground in this series so far. But again, there's so many topics that are having so much work done on them in Ann Arbor around sustainability that it's hard to cover everything. And so we're glad that we can cover something energy related because we know that's always of interest to a lot of folks around here, especially the sustainable energy utility. So if you've come to one of the sessions before, we're glad that you came out a couple times, and if this is your first one tonight, we're glad you're here as well. Now to just do a quick review of the agenda for what we're going to be up to tonight. I'll provide a little bit of introducing the topic and some framing for the topic this evening before introducing Missy, our panelist, who's going to give us a presentation. Then we're going to save a decent amount of time at the end this evening for questions and answers. We know this is a topic that a lot of people are interested in learning more about and have a lot of questions, so we'll save quite a bit of time for that. So yeah, feel free to take notes. I already see a few people with paper and pens, and yeah, please save your questions for the end. We will have quite a bit of time to cover those. And then as we close out, we'll share just a little bit of information about how to stay engaged and involved in what we're up to. We've got a lot of events coming up that we're going to talk a little bit about before closing out with a little survey. But with that, we'll just dive right in. So to begin, we'll share a little context around A20. Adopted in 2020, A20 is Ann Arbor's framework to achieve a just transition to carbon neutrality by 2030. Now, this framework has 7 strategies encompassing it. The first strategy is to power our electric grid with 100% renewable energy. The second is to transition our appliances and vehicles to electric power. The third strategy is to significantly improve the energy efficiency of our homes and buildings. The fourth strategy is to reduce our vehicle miles traveled by 50%. The fifth strategy is to change the way we use, reuse, and dispose of materials, so thinking about things like reuse, recycling, circular economy, compost, those sorts of things. And then strategy 6 is to enhance the resilience of our people and place. And then finally, we have other strategies, which encompasses all of the things that don't fit neatly into those other 6. Now, within each of these strategies, we have actions. And there are a lot of actions incorporated into A20. More than 44 mentioned directly in the plan itself. But really, in reality, there are more than 70 actions and initiatives that the city is taking to move climate action forward in Ann Arbor. But for this evening's conversation, we're going to focus a little bit in on strategy number 1, which is to power our electric grid with 100% renewable energy. Now, OSI has pioneered innovative and successful renewable energy programs in the past. For example, we can talk about Solarize, which is a program that helps reduce solar costs for residents by coordinating bulk purchasing and contracting. And through this program, we have helped install more than 700 residential solar arrays. And we're super proud of that. It's been very successful. However, we also recognize that owning solar, even at a discount, is not necessarily accessible to all residents, and we'll also need to rapidly deploy solar on non-residential properties if we want to achieve our goal of 100% renewable grid power by 2030. So with these barriers in mind, we're really excited that these may have a solution, and one that comes in a big way, thanks to Ann Arbor's next innovative renewable energy initiative, the Sustainable Energy Utility, or SEU. Now, really quickly, I'll introduce our panelist this evening. It's the fearless leader of the Office of Sustainability and Innovations, Dr. Missy Stoltz. Missy works with all city operations, residents, businesses, and the University of Michigan, nonprofits, and others, basically everyone in the community, to make Ann Arbor one of the most sustainable and equitable cities in America. Prior to joining the city, Missy worked with local governments and indigenous communities around the nation to advance their climate and sustainability goals, including during her time as the climate director at Local Governments for Sustainability and as a consultant to philanthropic organizations. Missy has a PhD in urban resilience from the University of Michigan, a master's in climate and society from Columbia University, and undergraduate degrees in marine biology and environmental science from the University of New England. Thank you, Missy, for joining us tonight. Now, without further ado, I would like to invite Missy to the podium to tell us a little bit more about what the Sustainable Energy Utility is, what's coming up next, and also how it fits into the broader context of energy in Ann Arbor. Thank you, Missy.
Thanks, Jordan. Hi, everybody. Yeah, it's being recorded, I believe, as we speak, which is such a gift. How are we doing? Yeah, what a night, right? You guys, if you don't know, and I don't say it at the end, I just want to tee up, A20 week starts on Sunday. You're going to hear a lot about this. We have over 30 events coming in the community over the next, 7 days from June 1st to June 7th. So we're going to say this is the teaser to A20 week. You are the beginning of our conversation today. So I get to talk to you about the SEU, the Sustainable Energy Utility, which is kind of like a little mini child of mine, and I'm excited to share where we are in progress. And I'm excited to tell you it exists. It was born officially per city policies and ordinances on April 17th. So happy birthday, SEU. What I'm gonna do in our time together, though, I'm just going to give you a little bit of context about what our emissions profiles look like here in Ann Arbor and why this is such an important initiative. I'm going to give you the vision that we came up with, excuse me, and then I'm going to tell you where we are in process of implementation. Jordan named it. We're going to have lots of time for questions, so feel free to jot them down. I'm happy to take any clarifying questions throughout, but if you want to get into kind of a richer discussion, we'll hopefully have plenty of time to do that towards the end. Y'all ready? Here we go. All right. So what's really critical is understanding what our emissions look like to help guide our decision making. There's an old saying, you can't effectively manage what you don't measure. I will counter that by saying not everything that matters can be measured. That said, we do measure greenhouse gas emissions here in the community. For us, this is kind of our mother metric. It guides a lot of the decision making. Now, Ann Arbor looks different than the national average in other cities, even other cities in our general area. And the reason for that, if you look at this pie chart, we do this inventory every year. We just got data today for 2025, or 2024, so you'll see that inventory being updated shortly. In our community, buildings are the largest source of emissions, significantly. About 70% of the emissions are coming from how we heat, we cool, we light, we operate in buildings themselves, with 40% of those emissions coming from electricity. Now, in the US, the majority of emissions actually come from transportation. So we're a little bit inverted here. We still have significant emissions from transportation, so that's obviously an area of emphasis for us, but we do have particularly high walk, bike, and transit ridership compared to many other areas in Michigan. So as we think about our strategies, we have to think about all of it, that entire pie chart. We've got to get to zero, right? We know, though, a really big piece of that is the strategy for these spaces we spend so much of our time in, our built infrastructure. We also know that we're increasing emissions in those spaces because we're doing more work in the built environment. We have more buildings coming up. We also are electrifying, right? So electric emissions we expect to kind of go up in the pie, but go down in aggregate. So there'll be a bigger percentage, but less. The pie will, if you will, get smaller as emissions are going down. And the reason for that is we're encouraging electrification to transition, as you heard in Strategy 2, away from fossil burning appliances to electric appliances and vehicles. And as we're doing that, and I'm proud to say Ann Arbor actually is the fastest electrifying city in the state of Michigan. We have the highest EV adoption rate in the state of Michigan. We're going to see these numbers change and evolve. So we've got to be thinking about our electric system, right? It's not enough to transition to the grid. We've got to clean the grid, the electric grid, as we take this transformation to its next level. So all of this is nestled in our strategy of A20, community-wide carbon neutrality by 2030. But I just wanted to posit, this is the emissions profile. So if you ask me, why are we thinking about electricity? We're thinking about it because it's a significant portion of our emissions, and it's going to be a growing portion of our emissions. Now, this is a snapshot in time. I'm going to show you another one in a second. When you look at the emissions profile of our electric system, what we see is that the majority of the electricity that we use is actually being produced from fossil sources. So this was in 2023. And you can see this sliver was the renewable portfolio standard that exists here in the state of Michigan. The utilities have to produce a certain amount of electricity from renewables. And then the other slices of the pie are things like our dams that we operate here in the city, some of the solar that we're installing that Jordan mentioned through things like Solarize. You also have commitments from Ann Arbor Public Schools that are coming online. You don't see UM's commitment because it came after for some significant renewables. But something happened in late 2023 that changed this landscape. And that is a series of clean energy policies that the legislature proposed and the governor signed. And what those did is basically changed the renewable portfolio standard so that by 2030, 50% of the electricity that's generated in our state from our investor-owned utilities needs to come from clean energy sources. That definition of clean is not the same as the definition of renewable, and we can talk about that if people want. But this policy also said that 100% of electricity needs to come from clean sources by 2035. So that's good news. The reason this is good news, right, it's changing the system, and it means the portion that Ann Arbor needs to solve for, if you look for you all on your left, that portion was 81% before this policy. If we look forward to today, we see a much smaller sliver that we're trying to solve for. Now, to be clear, we are not taking anyone at their word. If you want to talk about other initiatives that we do in our office, we intervene in cases constantly before the Michigan Public Service Commission. I wrote testimony today to push our utilities to add more renewables. Like, we continue to work on lots of different levers to change the system. I am going to focus, of course, on one lever, which is the sustainable energy utility for the rest of the talk. But if you want to know about the other things, I would be delighted to share more of what our office is working on in the energy sector. So this is kind of our energy landscape, right? So we understand our emissions profile, we understand how the electricity we're using is being generated, we understand what part of the equation we still have to solve for, and we probably need to understand the legal context, DRATs. So here's a little bit of detail about how we're operating. Some of you may have heard, sometimes in the news, there's stories about franchise negotiations, or Minneapolis secures a commitment from I can't even remember, I think it's Xcel is their utility, to do Y, or Chicago negotiates to get Z. That's great, and those happen through franchise negotiations. Franchises are rights to serve. They're rights to provide a service, like Comcast or AT&T have franchises with the city to lay their lines and provide service in the city. Gas is something we have a franchise for here in the city of Ann Arbor. And on Earth Day, we passed the very first franchise in the country that includes a climate commitment on the gas side. Pretty big news. On the electric side, however, our franchise, or our right to serve, predates something known as the Foot Act. And why that's relevant, there weren't a lot of us that existed as municipalities. Our franchise was signed in 1892. Later, the legislature ruled that no one can have a pre-Foot Act franchise that goes on forever unless it was at a certain point in time, and we were in that point in time. So our franchise for electric has been ruled in perpetuity. We can't negotiate it. It's gone to the courts. It's gone to the Michigan Supreme Court. Time and time again, they found we have a perpetual franchise. That is really unique. I have actually found no other community outside of Michigan that has this arrangement. So that puts us in a little different situation where I can't call our utility and negotiate more renewables. I can't ask for funding. I can ask for whatever I want, but there's no reason they would say yes, right? We're not in a negotiation on a franchise. What that also means is that we have to think creatively about how we work with utility. We do have one lever that some states don't have. Arizona doesn't have this, and I've been talking to them quite a bit about the SEU, and that is our Constitution, the Michigan Constitution, preserves the rights of cities and villages to form their own utility. And that can be through a takeover, like eminent domain, or through a competing utility. This is pretty unique in some parts of the country, and historically this wouldn't have made sense. Go back 20 years ago, what you would have effectively seen is if this is a road, our utility, IOU, investor-owned utility, would own all the poles and wires on this side. We would own all the poles and wires on that side. You'd split your rate base. Rates would go up because you don't have as many people subscribed. Double infrastructure, double problems. Just didn't really make a lot of sense. But thanks to the investment in distributed energy resources, the economics have changed. And so we started questioning, could we do something through this supplemental authorization that our Constitution preserves? So as kind of a recap, if you think about Ann Arbor and where we sit, it's important to understand the legal context, right? Both the Foot Act and what happened in the legislature and our Constitution. We basically have the options that are in the sub-bullets here. We can buy out DT. We can buy it all. We can municipalize in a traditional sense and own all of their infrastructure. We'd have to pay fair market value. We'd have to go through the courts, but we can do that. Constitution says we can. We could create a supplemental utility and define what that looks like. We could continue the relationship we have and just be like, ho hum, this is what we have. We can challenge them through public service commission interventions to do better, to be better. And we can always be creative, right? We can always work collaboratively on initiatives, or we can come up with new ideas. We chose the second. Well, and others. We do almost all of that, except for the first. So what we said was, what if we actually do create a supplemental utility? And what if that supplemental utility really leans into the A20 goals, which are renewable energy? The goals aren't to own distribution, the poles and the wires, right? The poles and the wires are the most vulnerable part of our system. They're the parts that the trees fall on, right, and knock circuits out. They're the parts that teenagers crash into or squirrels chew through, right? That's the part of the system that most frequently goes down. That's really not the game that we're most interested in. We want to know when we turn on the lights, clean electrons are powering our lives. Well, thanks to advancements in solar, energy storage, wind, geothermal, that's possible now. So we started to look at this question and we said, what if? What if we invest in a supplemental utility that's optional, that focuses on providing local energy, energy that's resilient, reliable, and hopefully more affordable for folks? Can we do this? Can we do this in a way that is a community utility? It's owned by the public. We work for the city. This is a public utility. It's one that can focus on things that maybe we can't get right now, like community solar, because our legislature hasn't enabled community solar at scale, and the utilities have to choose to do it, and they haven't chosen to do it in most parts of the state. Can we overcome these barriers by taking a little bit of control back, but not focusing on controlling the whole system, focusing on the future we want, which is a reliable, resilient, affordable, clean system? And so that was what we posited. We pulled together about 3 years ago a brain trust, and there were 5 individuals in this brain trust as we started asking this question. We had a legal expert, a technical expert, a social scientist, that would be me, and we had, I said legal, technical, economic expert, our social scientists, and I'm drawing a blank on our last, someone who knows policy, right? Different than legal. And we all sat down and we checked the box. We said, is this, number one, legally possible? And the answer was yes. Then it became, is it technically possible? And the answer was yes. And then we analyzed the economics. Well, good news. If you think about solar, how many of you in this room have solar right now in your home or your business? Okay, cool. Well, if you would like to talk to us about our Solarize program or sign up for the SEU, please visit us at the table in the back. We'd be happy to sign you up. Solar has a return on your investment. Right? There's an ROI associated with it. So the economics work. We know that. The question was, what does it look like with battery storage. And so we ran rate analyses. And then the last question we had to overcome was, does the public want this? Is there social appetite? And that's why we took it to the voters in November. And 78, almost 79% of the voters said, yes, we would like to have this. So here's what this means. We have an optional utility. No one has to take service, but anyone can take service in the city. You opt in for the service you want to take, and those services can look like what's on this screen. You can sign up to get solar and storage, or just energy storage, depending on what your needs might be. There are people who really can't lose power, ever. Medical devices. That's a common example we hear about. They might be a candidate for storage, and maybe not solar. Maybe that's the priority. For others, it's going to be economics. I want to save as much money as I can. They're probably a strong candidate for solar. For some, it's full decarbonization. I want a zero emissions household. Now we're talking about the suite of packages. We also have a reality that some of us have really pretty trees that shade our roofs, right? And we don't want to cut those trees down. But your neighbor might have a really big roof, and they could actually generate more power than they need. Well, because we're a utility, we can actually cross property lines and share power across through the utility. So you can't do that with me as an individual, but through the utility, we can do these things. So it opens up a whole bunch of different offerings, effectively allowing us to do things like microgrids, or district geothermal, where Jordan doesn't just get geothermal, his neighborhood gets geothermal, and everyone can tap into that system. That's how we're gonna make change at scale. So these are some of the offerings. The very first round of offerings, I can almost guarantee, will be solar and storage. Storage by itself as well will be an option. That's where we're gonna start. They're gonna be the bread and butter service offerings. We also will eventually, and by eventually I mean probably a year later, be offering things like energy efficiency programs and financing so that you can do things like more insulation to lower the amount of energy you actually use so those solar panels go further for you in terms of your total generation. The good news, our office, the Office of Sustainability and Innovations, already provides funding to help you do that work. So the SEU may not do that at the very beginning, but we will. We will continue to support you in that journey. So there's a relationship here between the utility and our department. I'm going to give you a few examples, actually, but before I give you them, I want to share a few pieces of how the utility is structured. So a little bit later, not too much longer in the presentation, I'm going to walk you through the timeline of where we are, what we've accomplished, and what's on the horizon for launching the SEU. A decision was made when the SEU was birthed. The key element there was we had to create an ordinance. So the public authorized it and said, yes, you can do this. Then we had to write the ordinance that said, this is what it is, and this is how it is governed. That ordinance can change over time, but we took that to City Council. It had to go through 2 readings, and when it passed, 10 days later is when it went into effect. So it passed on April 7th, which is why the 17th is its official birthday. And in that ordinance, we made the decision to start the SEU as a department of the city. Now, this is a municipal utility. Some municipal utilities are outside of local government. So Lansing, Chelsea, right? They're associated with the local government, but they have their own governing board. We made the decision to start it as a department because it doesn't exist. There's no revenue yet. There's no staff yet. And so in our eyes, the best way to launch this was sort of with the warm embrace of the city government. So it's got customer service. It's got billing support. We already have meters because we do water and we do wastewater systems, right? So we already have infrastructure to really help it stand up. Now, over time, we do envision it could spin out and be like those other utilities, but it would not start that way. Does that make sense? Okay. So as I talk about it, this is one of the things that I will continue to be the sustainability director, but I will work very, very, very closely with the director of this utility because a lot of the work we do is going to be pretty hard to differentiate at the beginning. The public's not going to know, oh, that's sustainability that's giving me rebates versus that's the utility that's giving me rebates, right? So it's going to be an interesting next few months. It's been a gift to work on this delightful initiative. So let's now pivot and talk a little bit more about the service offerings. I've got 4 examples here for you. These are not the world of ways the utility will work, but these are kind of the common things that people brought up as we were in discussion. So one is you don't have solar, you want to get solar, you're a good candidate, right, for the SEU. So the way this would work, right now there's an expression of interest form that's live. You would sign up for that form. Transparently, nothing is gonna happen for months. You're gonna get biweekly updates from me. You're gonna hear how things are progressing, but we are not ready to start building systems. We are 18 months away from getting solar on your roof. Okay, just managing expectations. But as we get close to that timeline, you're then gonna get a call from us, and someone on the technical team at the SEU is gonna say, great, I am so excited, Richard, that you are signing up for the SEU. I need some energy bills from you. I need to have a conversation to understand why. Like, why are you signing up? Maybe it is a medical situation, so let's talk about that, right? We'll probably come out and do an assessment. We gotta make sure your roof is okay. Can we put solar on that thing, or does your roof really need replacing before we can have this conversation? So we're gonna do an on-site assessment. We're gonna understand your use case, your price sensitivity, and then what we're gonna do is we're gonna design a system for you. And that system is gonna match your needs. So let's say you want solar and storage, and you're a good candidate for both. We're gonna put you in the rate model. We're gonna come and say, all right, Richard, solar only option is this per kilowatt hour. For you, that's 10% lower than DTE's rates today. If you go storage, it's a 5% premium over DTE's rates, but you have storage, right? And so it amortizes over the year with time of use rates to actually be a better deal, but your choice. Which do you wanna go with? You choose, you sign up, we come out and we install. We, city, SEU, owns those systems. You don't own them, right? They are a public asset. We have an easement to put it on your roof, to put it in your garage, wherever it is we're kind of operating within that system. Those systems are owned by the collective we, right? Because the utility is a public utility. We are the public. We own said thing. You pay per unit of production, just like you do today. You get your bill. You'll have a bill from DTE. You'll have a bill from the SEU. Your first bill comes from the SEU for everything you pull from that solar and storage system. If you need more, you're getting your DTE bill. If you don't, you get your standby charges from DTE for the pleasure of being connected to that system, and the SEU is providing all of your energy, and you're good to go. Conceptually make sense? Okay. So that's kind of by yourself, think individual households. We'll use Jordan again. This is Jordan's house. He has signed up. Richard is in the back. He has signed up. We are feeling good. You are signing up, and we sort of popcorn through the city in this way. Well, what if you don't have good solar potential? So I talk about this. I'm in a 2-story. In my neighborhood, we're built on all the infill from all the basements. So we don't have a basement. We went up instead of one level down, which means we're above the tree line. So our house is a really strong solar household. We actually generate more solar than we use. My next door neighbor has these glorious magnolia trees. Their solar potential is almost non-existent, right? Okay, well, one option is my neighbors could sign up for the SEU. They don't get solar. They're not a good candidate, right? We've done the assessment. The economics are not gonna make sense for them, but maybe a battery does. They're aging. One of them has a medical device. So they subscribe for the battery to make sure they always can hedge when the central grid goes down. They still have some stable power. They can also sign up such that when we get to the point that we can microgrid or share power across property lines, they can literally connect to my system. And so the SEU would buy my system from us at some sort of rate, or we'd have an arrangement. They might buy the system or they might buy the output. Instead of selling it to DTE, I sell excess to the sustainable energy utility, and it literally flows to my neighbors. So now they still are getting renewable electrons. It's just not on their roof. It's coming from their next door neighbor's roof. Does that make sense? So they can still get service. It's just the service is customized to what makes sense and what's practical for their individual use case. So in this case, they're still receiving those 2 bills as well, whatever they're drawing from the SEU and what they're drawing from DTE. Now let's take my case. I own that solar. I have solar and storage. So I enroll in the SEU, and maybe I decide I actually want more solar. Well, I can tell you my husband's thinking about another battery. That's one thing, we're in discussions. So maybe we decide we want another battery so we can have 4 days of consistent power supply just in case something goes really, really sideways. Great. I have my system, I own my system, but the SEU owns that second battery, and we pay for every unit of production from that separate battery. Over time, as my neighbors start signing up and the SEU needs more supply and is ready to launch microgrids, or literally wires strung between neighbors, I can sell any excess over, and you guys can actually use that excess, right? So in that way, it's literally sharing of community power. A last example, we have a lot of renters. 54 point, fill in the blank, % of all housing units in Ann Arbor are rental housing units. Renters can't make these kinds of decisions by themselves. And one of the common things we struggle with is known as the split incentive. Do I, as landlord or property manager, make an investment knowing I don't pay the utility bills, so I'm not going to get that return on my investment, most likely? Or does the tenant pay to make an improvement knowing they're going to leave it because they're not planning on staying? So there's a split incentive there. The SEU tries to come directly at that by saying, we're the ones who put the money down. You don't have to put any money down. When I bought our solar system, we had to finance that. We had to come down with capital. We had to go to the bank and get a loan and be able to pay for that system. But through the SEU, you don't have to put any money down because you don't own the system, right? The SEU, you own it because you're a member of the public, but you don't own that system explicitly and outright. So you don't have to put any capital down. That means landlords and tenants don't have a split incentive. The SEU puts the solar panels on the roof or the storage system, whatever the need is, and the person paying the bills, the person benefiting from those systems, is the one who's paying back that asset. They're paying for use of that asset. So it ameliorates some of that tension we traditionally see. Now, this does not deal with the fact if someone just doesn't want to do it and tenants really want it, it doesn't solve for that. But it does open up a lot more opportunities to overcome financial barriers to accessing these kinds of markets. You still with me? Thumbs up. Okay, you're doing great. So in this kind of last phase, I want to share with you what we have to do to start the SEU, and I will talk about what we've already done, what's like right now in motion, and what's on the horizon. There's a lot here. So we start from January 1. All right, that's kind of the clock for us. With the vote in November and holidays and just like chaos, we were not quite ready to start the countdown. So Jan 1, the first 3 months, we had to update that city charter, which we did. We had to hire some technical staff to help us because no one at the city works for the SEU yet. There are no staff. So I spend about 50% of my time working on the SEU, but I do not report to the SEU. Those will eventually be either bill-back hours or donated hours to the SEU to help it get stood up, right? So like no one's full-time job is creating this yet. We had to create the bylaws and the governance structure for the sustainable energy utility. Of course, we got to come and talk to people, and we got to work on hiring that first person. So we secured funding to hire an executive director. And actually, I have been successful thanks to the incredible team at the City of Ann Arbor. We've secured about $5 million in upfront capital to start the SEU. That's really important because it allows us to have a runway. We don't have revenue yet, right? We're not selling product, so we need to have that kind of runway, and that's really helpful in ensuring we can do things like hire the ED. So we're in this second tranche now, this 3 to 6 months. We're kind of bridging into the next. We have about a month before we get into the next tranche of time. What we've been working on in the last few weeks is a comprehensive plan for the SEU. Things like how do we do an intake form? How do we score an intake form so we can prioritize people coming in? Because we already have pretty passively about 1,000 households on the wait list for the SEU. It's just not realistic to think we can get to 1,000 households in one day, right? So we're gonna have to figure out what the strategy looks like. So we met with IT just today. We have a form, we're automating it. We're trying to be really transparent in how we prioritize. We continue to do stakeholder engagement. We've been looking for anchor tenants to come on board. You will hear this very publicly soon. We are in deep discussions with Ann Arbor Public Schools about buying out all of their existing solar and having that be the first assets in the SEU, which I'm really excited about because Ann Arbor, they don't just have solar. Many schools do, and many more schools will have solar. Many of them also have geothermal, and most schools are in neighborhoods. So we can start doing things like anchoring geothermal in a schoolyard and spider it out to the surrounding neighborhoods. We can think about community solar programs when we use schools as anchors. So we've been working quite a lot with them to understand the system sizes, the history of those, the production capability, what rates might look like. So that's actively in motion. We also have been doing a bunch of kind of outreach and education with folk about expectations. was 24 hours after the vote, and my neighbor asked me when he gets his battery. And I was like, okay. So, there's some conversations we're having with people about the reality, and I've already told you, it's likely January 1, 2027 before you see actual electrons flowing through the SEU. I would like it to be sooner, and I'm working really hard to make it sooner, but let's manage expectations, and then we'll exceed them. Feels like the right way to go. We are in the process right now of working on a scope to hire a rate firm that will be beside us as we make every decision from here on out, because rates matter. We know this, right? We need this to be something that's accessible and affordable for people. At a minimum, we want it at cost parity with our current electric rates. Ideally, we want it cheaper, right, than current rates. We are in a really topsy-turvy world. I'm not sure if you're aware. So when we voted, there were other things on the ballot that have since changed the clean energy landscape, and we're navigating that, right? What are tariffs doing to the prices of panels? The House bill to revoke all energy credits. That's not great. So we are also fighting to preserve as much as we can to have a stable system. The one thing that is true, if it impacts the SEU, it impacts the industry. So we're not uniquely positioned. Everyone in the industry is going to feel these impacts, so the whole industry is going to have to shift in that moment. But naming, that's a wild card that's not in this work plan because we didn't see it when we started working on the SEU. Fast forward, we are working to hire an executive director. So we had a search firm that came on board. They are identifying candidates, and we'll be in interviews, right, to figure out who is going to be this first SEU director, helping us actually, as the first staff member, move this forward. By end of the month, we'll have an RFP out for a rate firm. I mentioned that's really critical, someone who can be beside us to say, whoa, whoa, be careful. If you do this, that's probably going to increase rates. If you do this, that's going to be nice and stable, right? So we need experts beside us. I'm going to pause and ask you an audience participation question, acknowledging our friends online can't hear it, so I'll repeat. Who knows what year the last municipal utility formed in Michigan? Anyone want to guess? That's the correct answer, but do you want to guess? A long time ago, friends, was the response. Yeah?
1910?
Excellent. Yeah.
I'm guessing around 1930, Lansing's.
We've got a 1910 and a 1930. It's 1912. So we do not have contemporaries to go and call and talk about starting a utility, right? We have friends in Winter Park that we can have conversations with, but Winter Park is in Florida, and you probably all know local governments are creatures of the state in which they're nestled. So the rules in Florida are not the same as the rules in Michigan. So we learn a little bit, right? Like, what did you do that you would have done differently? What didn't work? Those are really helpful conversations. But when you're talking about Bolt versus the city of Lansing, which is a really key legal case that determines how you set rates, it's against the city of Lansing. It's only a Michigan law, right? So we just have different contexts that we're operating in broadly. So we are, in the next stretch, we're working on the scope of work to bring in a lot of technical experts. 2 days ago, I submitted grant funding. We're a finalist for an award, fingers crossed we win, to get even more award dollars to help us bring in more experts, to help us stand this up. We just got asked yesterday to do a national webinar because our peers, local governments, are really, really interested in this story. And we are leaning in, we are shouldering into those stories. So someone hears about this and wants to give us money, we will take your money. If anyone is a venture capitalist, I would very much like to talk to you after. In addition, one of the things that is not, I don't know if it's not a good news story. I don't know if it's a good news story. It is the reality of the moment. We did design a district geothermal system for the Bryant neighborhood in Ann Arbor. We were lucky enough to win a U.S. Department of Energy grant to do this design. We were one of 11 communities across the country. We worked with the residents through 2024 on that design. It would be a system that powered 262 homes, a school, a community center. Really exciting, right? Pretty cool stuff. In November, we won a $10 million award to implement, to actually build that system. However, a change in federal administration has called that into question. So it hasn't been revoked yet. That's great. I also don't have money yet. So hopefully what will happen is any day now, we will get permission to start building. And then we will have a geothermal system, a network system where we can do test rates for geothermal so that we can start offering that to the community, which we're really excited about too. So that's kind of a horizon issue. We also expect that the new SEU executive director will hire probably 2 or so staff to help them, to kind of like round out the team because we've secured that funding. We'll have a sense of rates. We'll be doing detailed analysis of homes. We'll be testing and we'll be building the base while all of this entire timeline, one of the things we've been doing is talking about financing. We have to get the money to launch, right? Eventually, we have to build the solar. Eventually, we have to build the geothermal. So we need to kind of simultaneously build a wait list, know we have demand, then take that demand to the market and get the best rate possible to be able to build those systems. So we've been talking to venture capitalists. We've been talking to the rate markets. We don't have revenue yet, so revenue bonds are tricky to navigate. We've been looking at green bonds. So our finance team has been playing a leadership role in helping us think about how are we going to fund the first buy. The first buy is really tricky. Second and third buy, you're a utility. You've got revenue. It just looks like a normal utility. So it's this first kind of startup. This is where not having contemporaries is more complicated. So that's where we stand. Just kind of to close us out here, a few things we're really aware of. We've always known that for the SEU to be successful, it's got to be cost competitive. The good news is it is. Now, as I mentioned, the energy landscape is shifting, and we are watching that really closely. We are fighting to preserve tax credits. Those will help us. We had a meeting with legal yesterday morning where we came up with some creative ideas in case the tax credits go away on what we may be able to do. So we are working really, really hard to make sure we can launch an SEU that is cost competitive with the traditional marketplace. We also, as a side, are intervening in DTE's rate case, and we are challenging the rate increase that they are bringing forward. So if anyone wants to talk about that on the side, I'm happy to talk about that. So we continue to push for rates in competitive marketplaces not to go so high in order to artificially make the SEU competitive, right? We want rates low. We want affordable, safe, clean energy for everybody. We also know that solar, we know for storage is not, it's not going to be, it doesn't traditionally have an ROI, a return on your investment in a traditional sense, but it is competitive with generators. And in Ann Arbor, we're selling a lot of generators because people have unreliable power. A battery is so much more than a generator, right? It can handle time of use rates. You can manage your solar more effectively. It of course works when the grid is down. And so we are working on making sure the resilience value of batteries is integrated into the models. And the good news is when you compare batteries and generators, especially with city programs, that math works, and you actually have a better deal moving in that direction. I'll close here on this part just by saying, I mentioned this before, the conversation we're in between interest and financing. You've got to have enough people interested in order to make the economics work. If just Shoshana signs up for the SEU, she has to pay the costs of all of the SEU, the billing system, the meters, staff salary. That's obviously ludicrous. She can't do that. So you have to have enough people subscribe so that the rates can stay low. So that's sort of the conversation we're in, and the actual go live date will depend on how much interest we have. We have to have enough interest to go live. So that's where we are with the SEU. Stay tuned. We have lots of engagement activities. If you haven't yet, please do sign up. The wait list is not a you're in. It is I am curious and want to stay in the know on this thing. We send bi-weekly updates, roughly bi-weekly updates about where we are in development. It's one page. It's generally like 4 bullet points, and it's just so you know first what is happening with the SEU. So we will not give you a deluge of information, but join us. That is actually helping us significantly go to those rate firms. When we say we have 1,000 people who are generally engaged and interested in this, that turns heads versus I have 10 people interested in this topic, right? And the goal is we will have the utility fully functioning and operational in the spring from a year from now. Now, we won't be doing service offerings yet, but we will be doing intakes. We'll be sizing your systems. We'll have contractors on board, right? We will be prepping. And if we have enough demand in that moment, that is when we go to market and secure the first capital, probably think 50 to 60 million that we have to pull down so we can then start installing. Welcome to the SEU, y'all. You're doing great. You're done. Questions, concerns, heartburn? Yay, Jason's got the mic.
So I have a lot of questions, but I'll just start with one. So when people are installing solar, their payback can be quite long without the IRA, with probably increased costs of panels due to Chinese tariffs, et cetera. So are you going to, do you have to come up with so much financing that you can buy all these systems and get enough revenue for them, from them, to pay it all back? I guess the financing seems
sure.
unclear to me.
Yeah, of course. So the answer is yes, of course, right? In a utility in Michigan, and generally a good practice is you have to be able to cover your costs with your rates. So when I said the economics of solar work, when we installed solar, we were at a time where net metering still existed, meaning every electron I sold, I got the same value as if I bought from the grid. It was kind of a one-to-one exchange. Our payback was 9 years. Today, payback without net metering is about 11 and a half, might be 12, depending on the size of your system, the particular economics. But solar panels are warranted for 25 years, right? And so that's the ROI that you're getting. From a government perspective and a utility perspective, we have a 25-year payment cycle. We've got to make sure we cover those rates over 25 years. What's different than other utilities is we don't have shareholders. You're our shareholders. So there isn't profit that has to be added to that. That lowers those rates, and that's how we're able to cover costs. So yes, tariffs are not great, but we have a runway, right, of timing in order to cover rates that a lot of other places don't by nature of that. Inverters, so you're talking 10 years is kind of generally the life cycle. And of course, technology continues to get better, so we're monitoring that pretty closely. Geothermal is a 50-year asset, so we just have longer runways, if you will, in order to have the financing pencil. But this is why we're hiring the rate firm, to actually make sure everything works, and we won't go live until it does. And that, it's possible. Like, let's not sugarcoat it. It's possible there's a terrible, terrible scenario in which it never works. That's possible. I don't see it, but it's possible.
Thanks, Missy.
Yeah.
For the number of customers you're looking at, what's the scale? Like, not just for interested customers, but do you have a calculation? Is it you need 100 households, 1,000 households, 10,000 households in the community where the economics start to work?
Yeah, the answer depends on who it is that's subscribed. So let's take Ann Arbor Public Schools. There are systems, and they're expanding their systems, that a single system could be 500 kW. Right, that's a pretty good size system. The magic number before we had the rate firm, when we did hire a rate firm, but it was kind of a preliminary rate analysis. The magic number was 20 megawatts. That was the go number. Because we're looking to take city sites, we've installed a lot of solar at our own buildings. AAPS has a lot of solar. If we start with those, we're already at 8 to 10 megawatts to start. So we are interested in looking. Universities announced it's going to do 25 megawatts. If we go in with the U, we launch, right? The U, AAPS, and the city, we're done. Like, we go live. We don't have to worry about it. So that's part of the reason we're interested in buying existing systems, large systems. We aren't talking about the 5 kW system on the average Ann Arbor. Actually, it's 7.5 is the average system size in Ann Arbor. So those are not the systems we're talking about buying at the beginning, because that's a lot of scale, right? And remember, we don't have staff yet. So we're trying to get the easy victory here. When you look at our registration list, though, what we have a lot of residential folks who've demonstrated interest, but we also have houses of worship who have signed up, and those will probably be 30 to 50, if I had to guess, kW kilowatt systems. We have some businesses, and those businesses vary. We have some who will be similar sized. We have some that might go to 100 megawatts, depending, or not megawatts, that would be extraordinary, 100 kilowatts, depending on the size of their roof. So the SEU, I talked a lot about residential because my assumption was most of you are coming as residents of the city, but the SEU can serve commercial, institutional, nonprofit organizations, and residential. So it's not limited in that way. Priority, I will tell you, priority once the SEU starts will almost certainly be to residents and new development, so it doesn't develop with fossil gas, so that it develops the right way from the beginning, because it is more expensive to retrofit. But starting will be large. We want large users to start because the economics work quicker.
So why would a commercial installation that has their solar already and it's on the roof and everything, why would they sell it to the SEU?
Yeah, there could be a few reasons. One, we're actually hearing Maintenance issues, just concerns, like not having to worry about it is something that could be valuable. Also, upfront capital. If you're in a tough moment and we can buy that, I can give you capital. I can pay you, and then you just pay your utility bill to the SEU. So you have a more stable monthly expense while you get an upfront check that helps you maybe hedge bad days, bad times, et cetera. Those are some examples. Yeah.
I don't want to be negative, but you said that it's possible that it wouldn't work.
Yeah.
Now, is that for political and economic reasons or technological?
No, it would be political. It would be if, I can't even think of the scenario that would make it that disastrous, but you would have to imagine the solar industry completely collapses, that we have no production, that we can't get materials into the state, period, full stop, or those that come in are at a 500% tariff, and so rates are incredibly high. Like that's the kind of shenanigans that we'd Now, I'm hoping those would be temporary shenanigans, so like it would delay start is my hope. But yeah, like that's the scenario.
So I'd like you to be honest, but
Yeah.
I'm looking for a yes answer on this, and that's that technologically,
Yeah.
we can get to a zero emissions technology that will support reasonable energy consumption.
Of course, yes. That was great. That was easy. Yes, of course we can do this. Yes. I mean, let's talk about the SEU's deployment for a second. So the answer is yes, like an individual scale for sure. We never expected 100% adoption through the SEU because it's optional. You don't have to take service, right? Now, I will tell you what we see in adoption rates. Trick question, you probably know this, but what's the number one determinant whether or not you get an EV? It's whether your neighbors have it. If you drive around Ann Arbor and you notice a solar panel, look at the neighboring houses. You'll almost certainly see many of them with solar, right? Humans, they're contagions, right? We keep up with the Joneses. It's what we do. If a neighbor decides to get a rain garden, you're questioning getting a rain garden. Is that what we do? Do we get rain gardens? Like, that's what this neighborhood does. We cut our grass to this level. That's what we do. And so we expect to see that social contagion theory that if you sign up for the SEU as an early adopter, people are going to start asking questions about why you got solar. And when you start dropping that your rates are stable while their rates are going up, you just sold everything for us, right? So someone is going to be out there who says, I don't like the government, I don't trust them, I'm not signing up for this. Okay, right? That's fine. So we don't expect that the SEU is going to solve all of this, but we expect it's going to take us pretty far on that journey. And then we're going to keep fighting for the rest of the system to change too, so that those who stay in the traditional system are still getting clean electrons.
Still, you have to have enough money to buy a car.
You gotta have money to buy a car, but guess what? With the SEU, no capital down. No, you don't, right? Because we're paying for it, so you don't have to put cash down. You didn't ask this question, but I will offer this. One of the things we've thought a lot about is that roof, right? We're not gonna put solar on your roof, even if you're a great candidate, if your roof needs replacement in the next few years. You're gonna have to deal with that. So we are talking about, can we offer programming and special financing? But that's gonna be one thing that has to be taken care of, right? That's just a terrible investment for us to put a 25-year asset on a system when you're gonna need to replace your roof in the next 2 years. We are, however, planning one roof replacement during the life of that system. So if year 15, your roof needs replacement, we would take it off, the solar off, and then reinstall it on your fresh roof. That feels reasonable. But that will be a cost. Like, you've gotta make sure you're ready to go if we're gonna install.
I have a question.
I'm so excited.
You talked about in the beginning about creating like parallel lines on either side of the street.
Mm-hmm.
Are you going to be building lines, or are you going to bury them?
That's a good question. So one of the beautiful things about the SEU is it has very, very limited distribution. So very few lines. You start by isolated systems, right? So you don't need lines for Jordan's house and Shoshana's house and Richard's house because they're not connected, right? It's just a kind of what's known as behind the meter system. When you get density though, now you're starting to connect. The idea, at least now, the way we're working through it is you bury those lines and they're short runs. So it literally is the 15 feet between you and your neighbor, right? That's the connection you have. Now, for something like community solar with the school as the anchor, we may have some above ground lines that kind of connect out, to be determined specifically. Undergrounding is really, really good for resilience and very expensive. In particular, if I think we don't really pay a lot of attention to electric infrastructure. It's kind of ubiquitous for most of us. But look, tonight, when you go home at where your lines run, for many of us, they're running through our backyard or they're running right beside that tree line. And so if you took those lines and buried them, you're having a conversation about your urban forest, right? What has to go in order to bury those lines. So we are much more interested in short runs where, like, between you and your neighbor, you may not have a tree, right? You may just have grass. And so that's an easy bury. But if we've got to go through a school forest to get somewhere, oh boy, like, that's, if you want to get in a fight in Ann Arbor, fight over trees. So, excuse me, that's not going to happen.
Thanks, Missy. You mentioned the economics of solar being more challenging without net metering right now. And that can cause folks to, it can be incentivized to undersize their system relative to their overall needs so that it's mostly sort of base load. You're not selling much back to the utility. And it seems to me that one way to overcome that is to increase electric use in the home at the moment that you're installing solar, right, through electrification, induction stoves, EV, and so forth. And you mentioned the SCU sort of introducing those programs, but probably later on after going down the solar route. I'm curious if you've thought about ways to pair those earlier to maximize the size of solar systems.
Yeah, I'm not sure if that was a softball or if you're leading me. If you do not already know, our office runs a series of rebates to help incentivize electrification. So you can get funding support to switch to an induction cooktop, to do a transition to an electric or a heat pump water heater, for a heat pump or mini splits to heat and cool your home. We do batteries, actually. We give rebates and incentives to help support electric panel upgrades. So our office already runs that program. Next year, our fiscal year at the city runs July 1 through June. And we have $2.1 million available for rebates in the community to help support electrification. The reason I said the SEU probably won't is because that's us right now. So we will still run those. They will just be separate from the SEU while it's kind of got to grow its muscle and grow up a little bit before I think it expands into new offerings. And since we're already doing it, we'll keep it for now in conversation with the SEU. Does that make sense? The differentiation, yeah. So it's not that we're not providing it, it's just it's gonna be in the Office of Sustainability and Innovations versus in the Sustainable Energy Utility team. Yeah. Ooh, sorry, I think.
Are those upgrades just residential or commercial as well?
Yeah, right now they're residential and multifamily. We're piloting a commercial program to understand what the commercial marketplace needs. So if you're multifamily commercial, yes, you're already eligible. We're looking, well, if you're interested and would like to be in our pilot, you're gonna have to work pretty closely with us to give us some data so we can understand what the commercial marketplace needs on rebates. So coming soon on commercial, but right now they're actively available and they're still available for this fiscal year for multifamily and single-family residential.
Okay, and another question regarding residential. So we have a very shaded lot. Our house is completely shaded.
Yeah.
Our neighbor has a pretty good roof. But what I'm thinking is that he gets to fulfill his needs completely before any of it gets sold, right? The only electricity that could be shared with me is what's in excess of what he needs. Is that correct?
That's right.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thanks.
And this, Shoshana sort of led us to this a little bit, that right now in the system, there is no incentive for you to overgenerate because you're losing money. With inflow, outflow, if you've got solar, you might spend, you're using your system and you're buying from the grid at 18, 19 cents, and they're paying you 9 cents when you push it, right? So you don't want to, that's why batteries are going up, because people are keeping it, right, to use it during different times. Through the SEU, though, if you can oversize, I know you can sell it to the SEU when you're not using it, and you get net metering or close to it, like you're in. It's a much more lucrative deal. It sort of makes sense if you've got a viable roof. But that is not going to be in the first phase because I have to be able to sell it to your neighbor, right? So I've got to build that wire between the two of you. That's why that'll be later. We're envisioning that in the second phase of the SEU. But we did get funding from the state to do a small pilot of about 20 households as a microgrid to really test the technology and understand what would the rates look like doing this. So we will do that in Bryant. Jordan leads a lot of our work in the Bryant neighborhood. We're trying to make that the first carbon neutral neighborhood in America. And so we've got a lot of funding going in to decarbonize those homes, and we'll do a small microgrid there so we can figure out all of these questions and be able to answer more specifically when we can bring this offering to you. You guys have done great. Questions, heartburn, excitement. Yeah.
How's that project there in Outer Farm Park? I think it's like Avalon,
Viridian?
Meridian? How's that working?
Oh, you know what? That also feels like a softball. If you would like to learn more about how things are going at Viridian, you could join us during A20 week, where we'll be showing a movie about Viridian at County Farm, I think at Viridian. And Jordan, do you know? I feel like it's Tuesday, but I can't remember. I know, I can probably pull it up. My understanding is really well. So that is a private development that the county and the city have kind of supported broadly. It is a carbon neutral development. It includes market rate housing as well as affordable housing. This project got a lot of attention and traction because it is pretty cutting edge, so much so that PBS is highlighting it in a 50 States of Sustainability series, and we're going to show that during A20 week. Yeah. Yeah. Oh, I think we're going here and then I'll come back to you. Yeah.
So I have a softball question and then a kind of logistics question. The softball one is, I assume, let's say you have solar on your roof, it's part of SEU, you don't do the maintenance, any of the other headaches. Is that correct?
Yeah, that's correct. You don't have to do anything.
Okay. And then the other question was, we talked about scale, and the magic number you said was 20 megawatts. I'm wondering, are there different thresholds or magic numbers in terms of your wait list and adoption that help you get to those additional stages, say, of funding?
I think that was probably, Richard, what you were also getting at broadly. Yes-ish. The reality on the wait list right now is it's largely residential. And so we're going to assume, again, we know through our programs like Solarize that the average system is 7.5 kW. So you can do the math of where that sort of takes us. But because we're working actively with commercial, those are bigger. As one illustration, we're designing a solar system at Wheeler, which is where our public works facility is. That system is 1.1 megawatts. Right? So if you pick up a few of those, you hit it quicker. So we're trying to do this relationship where we pick up some of the bigger systems and some of the residential systems, and it'll just be a math game of where we break. I think the reality we're facing now, maybe it's not reality, what we've sort of decided is we are going to try to buy existing systems, those big ones, those big commercial, because we can get to 20 really fast. And by getting to 20 faster, it means then I can get financing to get to that wait list quicker, right? Otherwise, I have to have, let's say, 2,500 people on the wait list. And imagine deploying 2,500 solar systems throughout the city. You know, it's gonna take some time. But if I have 20 megawatts that's already built, and I buy that, and that's what I start with, then I can roll through in a normal way. And everyone, you start quicker with economics, right? There's not a lag because I'm already getting revenue. And so I can actually then deploy more because I've got staff. I'm up and operational. So that's the intent. I'm sorry, I don't have a hard number for you. Yeah.
Quick question.
Yeah.
Are the residential subsidies means tested?
Can you reframe that in a way? I'm not sure I understand.
Do you have to be poor to get the subsidy?
Thank you. No, they are weighted in that there is more funding for income qualified households, but everyone qualifies for one of the rebates as long as you're in the city of Ann Arbor. Do you want to clarify? Maybe 1 out of every 20 applicants thinks they're in the city of Ann Arbor but doesn't pay Ann Arbor taxes. And if you don't pay Ann Arbor taxes, you're not eligible because these come from Ann Arbor taxes. So not Ann Arbor School District. Wah, wah. Yes. So if you, as an example, one of our rebate programs for, I think, induction stoves, if you were to make a transition, I think this is the right number. I think it's $500 is what you get from us, but you get $1,000 if you're low income. Right. And they do stack, for what it's worth, with utility rebates. Many of these also have utility programs too. So it's not that you get ours and you don't get anything else. They stack with all the other things available. We did it.
Can I add one more?
Yes, you can.
I'm curious about, I've seen a lot of talk online over the years about putting solar over like parking structures, right? Parking lots, instead of houses and worrying, there's no trees, it's all cleared out. Is there any, right, like if you went over to Pioneer, I don't know what it is, 20 acres of parking lot, you know? Is that something that could be used?
Yeah. Has anyone been to Vets Memorial Park in the last 2 weeks? Yeah, that's our system. So we have a big carport at Vets that is not yet connected, but it is built. So we are building more carports in parts of the city for us at our own sites. We own a lot of land. And we're not going to take green space out of commission, but we are doing roofs and we are doing more carports. Carports cost a little bit more money per kilowatt of production because you have more steel, right? You've got to build them, so there's more materials inherent within them. So we tend not to opt for those first. We tend to look at using the space to the maximum value we can. We tend to think nothing should be one thing. Right? A roof should not just provide shelter. It also can generate food. It also can generate power. It can be a shade and a recreational space. So how do we lean into the infrastructure that we do have? So that's kind of priority one. But we are certainly doing some carports. As an aside, we have done a study of the parking garages to see if we can do solar on top of them. And the answer is you can. It is incredibly expensive because they weren't designed for the wind shear. And so we'd have to do a whole bunch of reinforcing because you can imagine as you're up, if you've been on one of the decks or you've been like downtown, sometimes we get these wind kind of like alleys between the buildings. That is a potential to rip that solar off. And so you'd have to do a lot of core work on the parking garage, which would make the solar prohibitively expensive.
I was watching I was watching at home.
And you came in?
Yeah.
Good to see you.
I was just wondering, if you don't get that Bryant grant, or is there a timeline on that, or would there be some other sources of funding?
That's a
Or
good
what
question.
would you do if you don't?
If we don't get it, well, I'll cry and then I'll get over it. And then realistically, this is where this stands. So like kid gloves off, right? Our program officer still has a job. And that's not true for some of the other awards that we've won in our office. The geothermal office has continued to be funded, which is not true for some of the other offices federally. They continue to answer our phone calls. They're optimistic that that funding is going to come through, but they are in a really tough position, as you can imagine, at the moment. So we wait is what we do for now. In addition, we put contingencies in place. So we have spoken to 2 different organizations that have agreed to finance the project for us if we do not win the federal award. We have to do that rate firm and understand if that financing makes it still viable because Bryant is largely an income qualified neighborhood. And so we can't have really high rates, right? We have to make sure that this pencils for the households with the savings. But we are working on contingencies so that project can proceed. If you would like to contact your congressional delegation and let them know you would like that funding to be unlocked, I'm happy to give you contact details after.
Missy, you mentioned this in the talk, but I think it might be helpful to come back to it just a little bit. You mentioned earlier a scenario where you have signed up for the SCU and you get your monthly bill, and then a neighbor next to you potentially isn't in the SCU and they're seeing their rates increase. Could you give a little bit more context for what to expect for SCU rates over time?
Yeah.
Because I've heard that come up a couple times, and especially in the context of potential equity benefits of being in the SCU versus owning solar, that might be helpful to clarify what to expect for folks.
Yeah, that's a really good question. I'll attempt to do justice to this in that the SEU rates will probably shift. I mean, they will change over time, but incrementally. So the kinds of adjustments you can expect are things like cost of living adjustments, right, for the staff. A 3%, if that's what the market does, like we will do that. And so rates will shift, just like they kind of do traditionally. What you won't see are, there isn't a variable fuel price because we've already got the energy source. So if there's a war somewhere else, we're not worried about where are we going to get diesel or gas, right? That's not a question. And so you don't have that same variability that the utilities have. Your infrastructure is also largely built. So you don't have to invest in new infrastructure in the same way, and you don't have shareholders. And so what we've modeled and we'll finalize and make more robust with the rate firm is what happens over time. And what you sort of see is a little bit of benefit, and little bit could be 10%, it could be 20% cost savings, right, at the beginning, but it gets bigger. So even though rates might go up slightly, the utility rates are projected to go much higher. And so you actually have a larger delta in savings over time. That's a good question. And that though, I do want to be clear, is for solar. We haven't done geothermal yet because we don't have a lot of network geothermal in the US. The major system we know of is in Framingham, Massachusetts, and we have toured that. We've worked with their designers, like we are in very close communications, but we are, I would argue in the US, behind Europe, largely in geothermal deployment. So we have a lot to learn from our peers. So I can't speak to what those rates will look like. There though, you have a lot of variability because we heat with gas and we have a lot of global wars over gas. So good question. You did it. Good job, everybody. Any questions? I don't know if we're taking questions online. Probably not. Thumbs up? No, we're not. All right, well, I just want to say thank you so much. If you would like to talk to us, we're going to hang out in the back. We do have a little bit of sustainability swag, and please, please, please come say hi to us during A20 week. We kick off on Sunday. We'll be at Taste of Ann Arbor, the Dexter to Ann Arbor Run, AFC Ann Arbor. We've got tie-dye. We've got parties in your neighborhoods all week long. Please come say hi and engage with us. And sign up for our social media. Yay! Where are they? Join in the back. Thank you.